Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Reicheter, and today I'm joined by therapist and Miss United States 2018 Andromeda Peters. In this episode, Andromeda dives into trauma, how it manifests, the unexpected ways it finds us, and how somatic work and mindfulness can help reduce symptoms. She shares practical ways to stay present, set boundaries, and show up for yourself in healing. Thank you so much for joining me today. Before we begin, I want to check in. How are you really?
I am just coming out of a therapy session, which I love my clients. So the session was great, but now I'm just like working on slowly like shifting gears, coming out of therapy mode into like casual conversation mode.
That's really hard to do.
Yes, I have some grounding tools though. I have my like lavender essential oil that I put on whenever I'm like switching from one thing to the next. I just like take a little smell, put it on my wrist just to kind of help ground myself with some aromatherapy. So it always helps. And I've got some cold water next to me too.
I love that. Okay, I'm gonna steal that. I'm in my internship year and I'm starting to see clients and I'm not great at organizing my schedules, what I've learned. So I'm starting to realize I have to go back and forth between those hats a lot of being like an advocate and being in board meetings and then being a therapist back to back all day. Gotta learn to fix my schedule. But having tools that can help you kind of switch those hats in a way that's not very overwhelming and just happens naturally is something I really need.
Yeah, so help. And I try to make it things that I can like visually see on my desk. So I can just like, oh, there's the lavender. I'll just grab that. Or if I'm drinking a hot tea, I'll just grab that. So I don't have to go out of my way for it.
That's so smart. I'm gonna make myself a little kit to bring with me tomorrow. I'm really,
I love that.
so you will be getting an email with my picture of my kit later.
Please send it. I love that. The grounding starter pack.
Right? Genius. So good. Okay, so today we are going to have a casual conversation on trauma. And I'm really excited for this because I started a new psychiatrist recently and she was like, okay, if your medication's not working as well as it should be, maybe we need to talk about any trauma you've experienced. And had me start a therapist from a trauma informed lens. And I'm just excited to learn more about trauma and how it can manifest, where it can come from, because I never realized how much of a role it was playing in my own mental health. So this is so timely.
I'm so glad. And I feel like it might be timely, when this comes out to a lot of people because, there's so much happening in the political arena, which I'm not going to get political, but I'm just going to focus on the way that it is truly impacting people, not just in like logistical side, but also emotionally. So the hypervigilance is pretty up here in America right now, even depending on like, I think either political stance that you have, there's so much tension. I think that we could use just some different methods to help us resettle a little bit.
Yes, and I didn't realize. So I was just at the Florida State Capitol, and I didn't realize how much of what's happening is impacting me just emotionally until I was standing there talking with people and I was like, wow, we're cutting this much from mental health and there's a risk of more to be cut, and just feeling so kind of reliving that pain of ending up in the psychiatric unit and how helpless I felt. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be the reality for so many people. I mean, that could be the reality for me again. It really just everything happening in the world, whether it's that political side, it's funding, it's wars, it's the fires. There's so much happening and it is impacting us a lot more than we realize.
Absolutely. And you're right. It's not just, the States, it is worldwide. And I think, I'm glad that at least here, compared to a lot of countries, we can at least have these conversations, even if we, can't control the outcome of where funding is being cut. I mean, I hope that eventually with advocacy, we can, find some better conclusions. But just in the meantime, in the interim, what do we do? And I'm hoping that I can share some different tips with your listeners to help them just feel a little bit more at ease.
Yeah. So on this note, a lot of people think trauma is directly kind of witnessing maybe a more traumatic death or loss or being in a car accident or being in the midst of a shooting, like being in those very big events and our conversation, we talked about how trauma can also be watching something on the news. It could be getting this information. It's not just the typical definition of what a lot of us have come to believe or feel.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I always say I feel like, compared to so many other subject areas in the mental health realm, trauma is like in its infancy still, because just in the last 5 years, like there's been so much research and so many more methods that regular talk, not regular, but like your standard talk therapist is now implementing into sessions. People are becoming more trauma informed who at one point weren't really like specialists in this field. And it's interesting where trauma comes from. Like trauma in terms of being a study comes from like, our war veterans, and they would call it shell shock back then. And it was shell shock because they would, witness different bombings. They'd be right near it. And they're like, okay, well, physically they're okay, but emotionally they weren't. But then over time, they realized that individuals who weren't even on the field during combat were still coming back with trauma. So they changed the word, to kind of broaden it a little bit. But then as more time went on, we saw that individuals who never enlisted in the military, were having the same exact symptoms of individuals with PTSD, the whole, hyperarousal, avoidance, and just feeling that like hypervigilance whenever they were in a perceived dangerous situation. So we saw that they were children, people who were survivors of, whether it be various forms of child abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, people who were surviving domestic, violence situations, or individuals who would just witness something that was traumatic can still end up with PTSD. So it's expanded so much. And I think that, for so long, people who had trauma symptoms would say, like, well, I haven't survived a war. Maybe I wasn't abused as a child, but I'm still having these symptoms. So there was some imposter syndrome of putting words to their experience, actually getting help, even bringing it to therapy.
Like me. This is what I'm learning.
And so many people, I have so many clients who I work with and we're like, oh, I feel weird using that word. And I was, well, we don't have to use that word, but let's at least talk about the symptoms that you understand what's happening to your brain and body at different points in your life. And right now, with everything happening in the news, we have constant exposure to upsetting information, things that can kind of shake our feeling of emotional safety. And then, I think trauma also has expanded to now CPTSD, which is complex trauma. So chronic trauma that you experience over time. And it's mostly correlated with individuals who were exposed to trauma, earlier in life, oftentimes from someone who they knew. Judith Herman is a big pioneer in this area. She's written books and talked about it. And so the trick is that now societally, we're seeing so many of these different symptoms, whether it be the hypervigilance, whether it be the avoidance, whether it be in challenges and having a sense of self, that foundation being pretty shaken up, challenges in relationships and having boundaries and speaking up for ourselves, even if they actually didn't experience an air quote traumatic event. That's just from the constant stress in life that we're experiencing as a society.
And I think a big difference now in today's world is we didn't have access to all this information before. We didn't know what was happening around the world. We didn't know what was happening in other states all the time. These things that we're seeing on the rise might not even be as much on the rise as the information coming to us is on the rise. And recognizing that, I mean, I'll give you an example. Me and my dad. My dad's not active on social media. He's not sitting there checking the news all the time. Versus I'm getting updates all the time on Instagram or X or LinkedIn of all these things happening in the world. So I'm constantly taking this in versus someone from an older generation who's not actively clicking everything on his fingertips isn't taking in as much. And I think that's a big shift for the younger generations. I want to say like millennials and under, we are getting all of it all the time. And there is no break from what is happening everywhere in the world.
Yeah. And sometimes it feels kind of like my client, I use the term like involuntary information because it's like, I'm just, like maybe after work, just the usual scroll. But then like the floodgates are like everything that's happening in our political arena or what's happening with wars abroad. And it's like, oh, I was just coming on to like have a moment to myself, not be flooded with all this information. So it's coming at us from all angles, even if we're not seeking the information.
I just want to see what my friends are up to, comment, hype them up. And instead, I am seeing all that's happening in the world. And one part of me is like, it's good to know what's happening. It prevents that ignorance. But the other part of me is learning I have to also be mindful with what I'm taking in. I have to start implementing boundaries with the media, learning that so I set my Instagram like max daily to 5 hours. And I've been hitting max so early in my day and realizing that I need to be able to put it down. I need to not be checking it 24/7 because as much as I love going on and seeing what everyone's doing, it's impacting me. And I'm noticing even in my work this morning, I woke up and I didn't have any energy and I was just completely criticizing myself in every way, shape, or form. And it's impacting me. And I have to learn to be mindful and pay attention to it instead of kind of just being blissfully unaware of how I am consuming so much.
It's interesting that you say that because I feel like you use the phrase blissfully unaware, which I think so many of us can relate to. I do too. And I was said you have to be careful because the mind and body are very resilient and can immediately create like a new baseline or a new norm where it's like, oh, like my stress levels are up here. My emotional side of the brain is kind of at its peak right now. But you know what? Like I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing. I'm not gonna like listen to my body's like red flags and kind of scale back and like do some grounding or mindfulness because we can definitely function and accomplish a lot even in those hypervigilant states. So it's a matter of like, I think sometimes just the awareness is like the best, one of the best things to fine tune in the beginning of like, when am I aware that my body's telling me that it's overwhelmed? Even if I'm scrolling, if I want to find out what happens next in this article that I'm reading or this video that I'm watching, like practicing listening to our body's cues is really important.
It is. I cry a lot, but I'm so productive is something that I really resonate with, right? Go Taylor. Um, but I've recognized that may not be the healthiest thing for me anymore because it is draining me. And then I'm not showing up as me, but I'm not connected to myself either. And like you said, my baseline's becoming this high functioning level of anxiety and stress. And although I may have seen that as really productive and great in the past, I'm recognizing more so in my body, like, hey, this is becoming too much. I don't have the energy I used to have. I don't care as much as I used to. And that really feels heartbreaking because I cared so much. And then I've noticed that I just don't feel like me a lot anymore.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you use these other phrases to describe your experience. Because I think that sometimes, when we talk about mental health, it's like, okay, like I need to be aware of my emotions. Am I sad right now? Am I scared? Sometimes we don't know what we're feeling emotionally or have the words, but we can find other ways to describe our current state in that moment. Maybe it's how I'm feeling physically. Maybe you might notice that, like, for me, whenever I'm anxious, my heart rate speeds up, but my GI, my stomach, gets really upset. So that's my cue of like, oh, we're there. Or I might feel kind of like sweaty or, you know, um, just more uneasy in my clothing. Like that's my sign. Or if that doesn't stand out to me, maybe my behavior will show me. I'll scroll more or I'll comfort eat. Those are all the signs for me. So even if you don't notice the emotional state first or the physical, just find those categories. Like what are my behaviors, looking like right now? What is my physical state right now? What's my emotionally? Maybe we can connect with one of those things and that can help us tune in a little bit in those moments.
Yes, oh, exactly. And I've noticed for me, I'm so happy you shared those because I've noticed for me too, it's also these changes in my eating habits. For me, it's not wanting to eat. It's not wanting to fuel myself. It's like I notice the lack of energy and then I'm doing everything I can to continue to reduce it. And it's so not something I'm even paying attention to. It's just, I guess I notice it afterwards. I notice it when my jeans are a little too big on me and they weren't before. And that's really hard because if we're not aware of our emotions, it is so important to find something we can be aware of. Like you said, our body and how our behaviors are changing can be such key insight to help us recognize, hey, I need to explore more of what's happening on that mental health level with my emotions and figure out, I mean, even spiritually, figure out where I belong and what's changing and just ground myself in the present moment and who I actually am and not who all these messages are telling me I should be or believe or think or feel.
It is such a different way of life right now, like through technology. I mean, it's given us, I think, so many advantages, but also, if not kind of like tailored or without our level of intentionality when we're utilizing these different like ways of connecting, especially social media platforms, it really can like I think help us like cause us to disconnect from a sense of self. Like someone asked me about like, oh, do you remember what life was like before technology? And it's like I'm a millennial, so I did have a whole childhood without like an iPhone, but like it is kind of hard to remember. Like, what are the things that I used to do? And so I have to give myself, like, even before all the changes with administration, like social media detoxes every now and then, like, every week or so, just to kind of like jump off for a little bit. Cause social media is such a big part of my job as a public figure. And even as a therapist, I like to use social media to share different tips that can help people, but it's very, very time consuming. And so when we're constantly taking in messages, like our brains are always having a response to everything that we see and hear. So taking that time out to just like disconnect from something external and go within is really important. And I feel like people talk about that a lot, but not necessarily like how to do it. So
Oh, that's the thing with social media too, is we are having these conversations in the sense of, oh, we should be doing digital detoxes. We should be looking within, but no one's telling us how to do it. And a lot of us who are talking about it may not also be implementing it. So we're like, yeah, we should be doing this. And then we're not doing it. So we're not learning how to do it. And then other people are like, well, I don't know how they do it. So I'm not going to do it. I
yeah,
just, there's so much of bringing awareness to terms and things we should do, but no like direction on how to get started. Because if your whole world is based on checking to see what's happening or making sure you're posting enough so that you can be, so that brands want to work with you, so that people can identify with you, so that your numbers can go up on different things, it's so hard to figure out where the detox, where to take that break, how it's impacting you if no one is giving you actual tangible tools to do.
right. The other night, I actually had a dream about checking my algorithms, and like I was like in the dream, like, okay, I have to use this hashtag instead. And I woke up like, whoa, Andromeda, like, where are we right now? And what do we have to do to like not be there? And I remember like my introductions to like social media. I did pageants. I won Miss United States back in 2018. And right after I won, I was like, this is fantastic. I had all these wonderful experiences, but also a lot of pressure of like, okay, you've got to post this many times a week and make sure that you bring your followers along with you. And I never really thought about like what comes with an experience like that. And so even the pressure of like, well, you can't be like a public figure or an influencer or model and a therapist. You've got to pick one or the other. So constant pressure to like change myself, change who I am, and meet everybody else's standards. That really didn't feel like me at all. So it really did take me like disconnecting altogether. I want to say like maybe a couple of years ago. It was actually after my father had passed away. It was like kind of caught me by surprise, and it was a really, really low point for me emotionally. Um, I just disconnected entirely, but not by like my own choice. I just physically and emotionally did not have the bandwidth to kind of be out there. But it really gave me so much insight to have that time to grieve, to go through those hard moments, to just be present with my emotions. I was like, wow, like I'm actually not numbing myself. I'm actually present with this feeling, and it doesn't feel easy. It's actually really hard, and I feel really incapable, but like I'm just going to be here. And I like work through that pressure of being out there just to be present with myself inside. And in that moment, I realized, like, wait a minute, like none of that actually was me. All the things that I've done up to now, like some of it was, but a lot of it was just like pressure to show up in certain spaces to match somebody else's expectation. That was like a specialist in terms of branding and all of that, which I respect everyone's opinion, but I needed to really find myself. And that time to myself, like about 2 years ago, I kind of came back online, like, you know what? Like, I am in all these spaces, but it's all part of who I am. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of everything. And at my own pace, at my own time, I'm not going to actually post every day. I'm not even going to set a schedule of how many times a week I'm going to post. I'm just going to follow my inspiration. And that has been so helpful for me.
Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. It's really amazing to hear the way you were able to grieve, how you were able to kind of disconnect from all those outside voices and everything happening and not numb yourself, but actually look within and feel. So I think that's something we don't do often. We want to numb those difficult emotions. We want to numb those experiences to make it easier. And all that does is really help us disconnect from ourselves and then experiencing it all at once so much later
Yeah,
and
it will.
not knowing how to cope with it.
Yes, whether you take it on now or later, it will find you. And when it finds you, it usually is like we're usually in a crisis by that point. And when we're not present with ourselves, we're also not present for the support around us. Like I was able to lean in on family and my other dad and my friends and just so much support that I had because you don't really see it when you're just disconnecting because not only are we disconnecting from the hard feelings, but also the nice ones, the like enjoyable ones, enjoyable ones and the enjoyable experiences too. So we're present with ourselves long enough to train our minds and bodies on how to deal with the big feelings. We can then enjoy the good stuff that life has to offer as well.
One doesn't exist without the other. And that's been really difficult for me to come to terms with because I so badly don't like the big emotions that aren't fun because it hurts. And even having all the education and the coping skills and the self-care practices, it's so easy to slip into not wanting to do any of it and just stopping or kind of relying on old things that did work and not recognizing, hey, this isn't working anymore and I need to make adjustments. It's like I give up, nothing works.
That's so true. And I feel like, I always, what I realize, what I tell my clients often is that like all those self-care practices are like they're really good for us, but I think maybe there's a few steps before we get to the self-care, right? And so I always say like before we try to analyze any emotion, try to make sense of it all, go for that facial or whatever it is that people do for self-care because everyone's got their own stuff. um let's just take a moment to kind of just be here and like help our bodies get to a point of emotional safety. So what I explain to people is that if we're anxious or afraid, you know, we're experiencing that as a human, but there's things happening on a physiological level inside of us. So like my clients can tell you when I'm anxious, I'm in the brainstem and here's what happens. So we're in the brainstem and we're in fight or flight and our body's being pumped with like all these stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. The blood is moving differently, our digestive system shuts down, our immune system shuts down, with at least our memories very fragmented. That's why our trauma memories kind of find us in random places later in life. So all that's happening in our body. So in that moment, whether we notice it through our behavior, through how we're feeling physically, through how we're feeling emotionally, it's like that's our cue to do something about it. So I like to go into like the real basic stuff, the somatic stuff, or the bottom up approach, taking care of my body first, my mind can begin to feel safe again. And there's just simple practices that we don't need anything else, just ourselves and our hands or the different senses that we have access to. So one of my favorite ones is just like this one called havening, where you just like move your arms up and down your shoulders. And it is the most relaxing thing ever. And just like spending a few minutes here and just breathing, you can do like a nice visualization if you want, or just breathe. Just so many wonders for your nervous system. And like maybe that alone, like maybe once I feel safe again, I feel at ease, then I'll be ready to go ahead and go on that walk or, watch that movie or call that friend because now my body's not panicking, trying to figure out how to keep me alive. It's like, okay, this is hard, but I'm actually am safe in my environment right now. So just like the few steps before getting to that point can be really helpful too.
Okay, why has no one ever talked to me about this before? Why am I not learning this? That is so true. When I go straight to, I like to walk. When I go straight into like that really angry, frustrated, overwhelmed walk, I spend the entire time just not creating all these conversations in my head, creating all these responses and reactions. And I'm not actually, I feel like getting that peace out of it, getting that sense of calm, connecting with myself and what I want. I'm just trying to get all that stress and frustration out until I get home and just my body hurts and I don't know what to do. And I'm like, oh, why is this not working?
Yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of I again that's why I said like I think trauma specifically is in its infancy compared to so many other, specific disciplines like in the like psychiatric scope. because, there's are only a few pioneers and some of that research is only a few decades old. Peter Levine is one of, the founders in terms of like, I won't say founder, but he's definitely one of the earlier researchers and practitioners who really highlighted the importance of somatic work or the bottom-up approach. And, he used a lot of these practices and working with a lot of like military veterans who came out of combat, how to help us move that trauma from our bodies. And the example that he gives is if something happens to an animal, like if they're attacked or something, like they're also in the brainstem. They're in fight or flight too, and their bodies are also pumping all the stress hormones. But afterwards, they do something that helps them release that, and that animal will shake. Their bodies just naturally shake, and they shake all that tension out. Then they're able to kind of like, okay, I'm good, and I can move on and finish doing whatever I was doing in these woods. So, but as humans, like we don't have those set practices anymore. I think at some point we did, maybe before modern society, but we lost our connection to all of that. So we've got to find different ways to bring it back that kind of like also works for us to weave in with modern society. Because I can do this hazing in between sessions on a plane somewhere, and like I look perfectly normal and I feel really good doing it.
And that's the thing is, we think it has to be all these big things. We think it requires so many outside external pieces, and it doesn't. It can be as simple as it is as simple as connecting with ourselves in the present moment. But at least for me, I feel like we live in a society that's very external and very focused on production and what's happening out there, that we never make time to look within or just time for ourselves anymore because we're so focused on that output.
It's so true. Even the whole like self-care conversations. I do self-care panels for women like throughout my community, like every few months. And so I have different women who are in different disciplines come on and talk about their journey with mental health. And our community gets to come. It's perfectly free to all of them. But we often talk about the idea of like this perfect self-care that also feels so unachievable. You go on Pinterest and it's like, oh, I live for, this whole like clean girl aesthetic things. Like I would love all of that, but it's like, I don't have time for that. So does that mean I don't get to have like my self-care experience? So I often try to highlight like, let's remove perfection and like think about how often can I give myself a self-care moment in my day? And like, this is a self-care moment, or using my little essential oils or drinking a cup of tea that I can like focus on how the cup feels in my hand or how warm the tea feels when I take a sip of it. Like those are self-care moments that I can give myself that don't require a lot, don't require a whole lot of time, money, all the bells and whistles, just little simple things that we can do for ourselves.
Yes. Oh, that's the thing with my self-care workbook. It's all about how you can integrate with your financial constraints, your time constraints, what actually works for you. So where you can find 30 seconds, maybe for deep breathing or a minute for stretching, 5 minutes to have that cup of tea or just walk outside, take a lap, where you can actually fit it in your schedule because 2020 TikTok was such a time. And I love it, right? And I went down that rabbit hole of, well, self-care is the face mask and it's all this expensive skincare. And I remember calling my dad in tears, just in full on tears of, I need to buy all this moisturizer. I need $300 to buy all this stuff so that I can feel better. I'm like, that's the self-care. That's what I need, self-care. And he was like, if you can justify to me how moisturizer is going to cure your depression, I will give you the money. And I could not justify it. TikTok said. And that's when I realized how much pressure there is to do all these really big things and how harmful the messaging is when that's all we're talking about. It can be so simple. You said that essential oil. It can be so many things that are actually, what was this called again, by the way?
Evening.
Evening?
Evening, yes.
Love
So,
that.
yeah. Stimulates our nervous system and just helps us resettle and like gives us that reset. There's so many different, I post on TikTok like these things all the time and Instagram, like just different movements that we can do, like in between meetings, in between, going from one event to the next, whatever we have to do on our plate, just takes 30 seconds or 60 seconds of your time. There's also this one is called bilateral stimulation, where same thing, but you're just like patting your hand up and down like that. And that also feels so good. It's so relaxing. And we have access to ourselves, to our bodies. And, if you can't use your hands, if you're like, I like to also post ones where it's like, well, if you're out in public, what do you do? And there's one that you do where you just kind of like, this is also pure Louise. You open up your mouth, like just open and close it, and then just breathe while you're doing it. And that might cause you to yawn. So it simulates your brain to be into rest state. So naturally that takes us out of fight or flight as well. Simple little things that, they're free also free.
They're free and they take so little time because, again, we live in this world where it's all about production and to keep going. And we're taught that resilience is never stopping and that success has to do with how much you can put out there. And it's so hard to remember to take time for ourselves. And when we think it's these big things, when we think it's going for a spa day or going for a run, training for a marathon, whatever it is, and we think it's all these big time consuming things and big financial commitments, we just assume that we don't have the resources to prioritize ourselves and we don't deserve it. And that's not true. And those are conversations we need to have, that it's not something that requires an excess amount of time. It's not something that requires you giving up sleep in the morning to get up at 4 a.m. to start your day with it. It's not something that requires breaking your bank account. It just requires you being present with yourself in the moment and finding that one moment. Maybe you have 10 minutes between meetings. You can spare 30 seconds. Maybe you have an extra 20 or 30 minutes before you have to really get ready for the day. You can totally find 30 seconds or 1 minute to be present for yourself.
It's so true. It's a lot more simple than we realize, but it's also not our fault, right? Like the media has kind of, created this, it's like it's actually I feel like an industry now, kind of like the holidays, like Halloween, Christmas, and then now it's self-care, buy these face masks, buy these slippers, which cute. I love a good face mask. I love cozy things. However, like that's not always doable for me. And I've got to be okay with that. And also when I do something like bilateral stimulation or havening or breath work, then I'm actually present for that face mask. I'm not thinking about the meeting that I have next or, the things I didn't do last week. My nervous system is regulated enough to be able to also enjoy that cup of tea that I might be able to have later on or be able to read that book. You're even saying like, just, that short time, we can easily carve that out for ourselves. Like, even like going to the bathroom, like you can wash your hands and just focus on how the water feels while you're washing your hands on your bathroom breaks and just take a few breaths while you're doing that. And that's also so grounding and so easy to do. So what I try to focus on, with social media and any kind of platform I'm given is a way to make taking care of ourselves so accessible. Kind of like what you're doing with your workbook, like these different things that we can do that, you know, aren't too daunting. Just, it's just a simple moment for ourselves. And I think that's important because, you mentioned a few times like that pressure for productivity in society. And what that does is it kind of cultivates those like trauma symptoms, even if someone doesn't have PTSD or complex PTSD, because, we're meant to experience like stress, our bodies can handle it, but we're meant to come in and out of stress, not sustain it for long periods of time. But if we're stressed about like a grade, then work, and then I've got to go get gas and I've got to go do this, we don't have a break.
I don't. And it's so frustrating that we're not taught this. We're taught to be going 24/7. And one thing I've learned is maybe that face mask is your self-care, maybe going to get your nails and toes done, but it's not self-care without the intention. It's not self-care without being present. That's what self-care is. So in whatever way you do it, really being present with yourself, like you said, if your thoughts racing with a million different things you need to do, you're not really taking that time for you. And that's the whole part of self-care, is self and caring for yourself. It's not to just keep going. This morning, I feel like my conversations with my dad are so helpful sometimes. He called me sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. He called me and was like, it's President's Day. It's a national holiday, so don't work too hard. Get your work done, but take breaks. It's not a business day. And I just gave him a long list of all these things I need to do. And I was like starting to be like hyperventilate. I was like, I don't have time to take a break. There's no time. I don't understand how other people get to take a break. What am I doing wrong? Just that whole list of all those insecurities coming out. And he had to remind me that it takes time. Like, life takes time. You have so many years ahead of you. You don't have to do it all right now. The only thing you have to do is survive. So, to survive, you need to be present with yourself. Otherwise, your mental health is declining, and we end up where we were 6 years ago, back in a psychiatric unit or worse. And that was really a good reminder to hear this morning. I took time to actually have breakfast. So,
That's amazing. Yeah, like even something like that, like, like just sitting down to eat breakfast. Like, I know that sounds like such a small thing, but for a lot of people, myself included sometimes, it's like it's hard to make that happen, or it feels hard at least. I don't want to like speak in facts right now or extremes, but because I do that a lot sometimes. But yeah, just like to sit and eat and like nourish yourself and I like to remind people that anything that you do for yourself, it's you showing up for yourself. Drinking water is showing up for yourself, sitting down to like nourish your body. Like I always tell my clients, like, and myself, give yourself the credit for everything that you do for yourself. And it also like stimulates that like positive reinforcements, which our brains love so much. Like, wow, you ate breakfast today. Like, yes, like I am doing so great at life. I had breakfast, or I drink water, or, I got an extra hour of sleep. Like, all that deserves our praise because again, like when there's so many demands in life, it's hard for us to actually hold the lens of like, I am doing a lot and I'm actually doing enough and I deserve my credit.
yes, exactly. Our brains love that positive reinforcement and to acknowledge, we like to celebrate ourselves. We love the good emotions, the fun emotions. So creating that with our self-care is so important. And it was so huge for me to not try to eat something while working. I just sat down, had breakfast. I had my computer off, closed. My phone was on Do Not Disturb, and I was just having breakfast, right? So amazing. Not something I ever do. And I just realized how much I needed that, how much I needed to feel calm. I needed to feel present. I needed to enjoy the food I was eating because I get to places where I don't want to eat and I want to punish myself by restricting. So, by making that time to actually eat present with myself and realize how much I enjoy the food, really helped kind of, hopefully, can't say for sure yet, it's been like an hour, but hopefully help curb that mindset of don't eat to I deserve to feel fueled and good.
Yeah. Eating at the eat, our relationship with food, I think so many people have their own stories with it. Um, like I relate from both angles, like, getting food grief from overeating. And I gained like 70 pounds after, my other father passed. But then also like my whole adolescence, I struggled with ED and bulimia and anorexia. So it's like I like found the other spectrum. And now like trying to be mindful about my relationship in the middle of like, okay, like whenever I eat something, it's to like nourish myself because I actually like I want to live and I do care about myself and I do want to survive. And I think that looks different for all of us. Like what that narrative sounds like, the way that we view putting food into our body, or if it's not that good for me. Like last night I had a bag of Sour Patch Kids. I was like, this is delicious. This is yummy. And I get to watch my show and like, this is good. But it took a lot of like, just enjoy it. This is for you. Like, it's okay. So, it's a very tricky one, which is why I really appreciate your point of like, yeah, I didn't distract myself. I wasn't on my phone. I wasn't on my computer. I just sat and ate because that also is grounding by like being present with ourselves to be able to kind of like be aware of different thoughts that we're having or different emotions, even if they're not always like positive, but just like, it's okay. Like, this does feel a little bit hard right now, but like, it's okay. I'm still doing it. I'm still taking care of me. Or this feels really good right now. I want to do more of it. Like, either way, it's okay. So I love that you brought that in. I think that I'm like, I tell my clients, like, eat your food, but like, try not to watch TV or scroll on your phone or, just try to be present in that moment.
And I mean, it's in all aspects of our lives, right? The relationship we have with ourselves, with work, with our phones, with social media, with other people, with our food, with moving our bodies, all these different aspects. When we're able to disconnect from the external thoughts, right? The external messages that we're getting, when we're able to disconnect from all these distractions and just be present with ourselves, we can explore what thoughts are actually coming up and begin to move toward a place where we developed a healthier relationship. We're able to start to heal a little bit. But if we're not recognizing these really intrusive thoughts that are impacting us, they're impacting how we feel about ourselves and about our lives, we just kind of sit in it more and more until we get to that place, at least for me, till I get to that place of just not liking myself, not feeling connected to myself, not wanting to be myself.
So true. That's such a good point. I remember, I don't know where I learned this from, but I wonder if I can draw real quick. Can I draw a picture really fast?
Yes.
So someone told me, and I forget where I saw this, maybe it was a podcast. This was like at least 5 years ago. That so one side, I don't know if you can see that.
Yes.
Okay, so one side we have air quote positive emotion, the other side we have air quote negative emotion. And most of the time we spend our lives like outside the circle, outside of both, because we don't want to feel this one. So rather than trying to be present for this one, we leave and we distract ourselves with social media. Maybe it's different substances. Maybe it's food. Maybe it's different relationships that also aren't the best for us. But what that does is it keeps us away from this one too. And by doing things like grounding work, breath work, the havening, just being present while you're eating your meal, we can exist somewhere in between because that's like the normal space of existing. And if we ever want to go outside of ourselves to like use these other things like social media, hang out with friends and a relationship, we are intentionally visiting here. We're intentionally visiting there, but we always make our way back. And that's why I loved your point earlier of talking about like those boundaries with media, boundaries within ourselves of like, okay, like when is my time where I'm allowed to just kind of like have my time for social media because it's not the enemy, or go out with friends, or pour into a relationship because there's space for all of that. It's just a matter of like, do I exist outside of myself all the time, or am I intentionally choosing to give my time to this person or to this activity or to that thing and eventually make my way back?
Yeah.
So yeah, this was really like really hit home for me because I'm like, wow, we do spend so much of our time like outside of all of it that we can't really fully be present for like those like sunsets or I like to look at the sky a lot, like what the clouds are doing up there, like those like beautiful moments that find us that like we don't always like take in and appreciate.
Yes. Oh, I love that diagram. And it's so incredibly true. I was saying the other day, so I just moved to Los Angeles to finish up my master's. I'm loving it, and I never want the magic of seeing the Hollywood sign or walking down Rodeo Drive or seeing Santa Monica Pier, Malibu Beach. I never want that magic to go away. And when I'm so focused on all these external pieces, I disconnect from the beauty around me. How many times in my life am I gonna have the opportunity to just
Mhm.
put my work down and go for a walk on Malibu Beach? How many times in my life am I gonna be able to just take a nice walk down Rodeo Drive without worrying about all these external pressures and time management? How often am I gonna have this? So I wanna enjoy it while I can, and that all revolves me being present. Because if I'm there and I'm not present, I'm not even seeing it. I want I want it to feel magical. I want life to feel those magical moments because then it makes the difficult moments worth it. Otherwise, it's just these difficult moments and then I disconnect from myself to try to get through it, and all I'm doing is making the world around me a villain. I'm making social media the villain in my story. I'm making
Yeah.
everything around me is turning into a villain, and then I'm kind of becoming the villain to myself and my own self-love.
They want to shut down and want to, for me anyway, like my antidote for that years and years ago were like, I'll just isolate and I won't go out as much and I'll be off the grid, which props to people who can do it, but I'm not that kind of girl. I do see the value in technology and social media. It's just a matter of like making it work for me versus just like kind of falling into like doing things on autopilot that I realize like hours have passed and like I still have things to do or things I want to do for myself. And so, and it's not our fault. Like, in kindergarten, they weren't teaching us how to feel our big feelings. And that's why I love to like go to different schools and teach little babies and kids about like mindfulness and how to name emotions. Like, I think if we had that training earlier on, we would be able to be more intentional about like taking in the Hollywood sign. And so it's a matter of like putting these things into practice and like knowing that it takes practice. And even if our minds are wandering, it's okay, but like we can notice it and just like gently keep practicing bringing it back because our minds, we are meant to think and the brain loves to problem solve and it's trying to take care of us. Like intrusive thoughts are not the enemy. It's just the brain doing what it's doing. But we have to be the eyes and ears for the brain of like, well, I am safe right now. There's nothing for us to do in this moment. I'm going to keep bringing us back so I can enjoy this view or this show that I'm watching and just kind of like practice being at ease with like putting those different things into play from time to time.
Yes. I mean, imagine if growing up you learned not to don't cry and you have so much to be happy about. There's so much good. Get over it. Those messages weren't what we were taking in. So much could be different. So as you're wrapping up, what is one piece of advice you would like to give our listeners?
Well, that's a good question. I would say just to be easy with yourself, because even though we're talking about things that are good for you, it still does take putting things into practice and just to meet yourself with grace in that process.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.